General,
Matt.
thank you for coming out here to Red Hook.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And for a little more context, General Michael Hayden here was the director of the NSA from 1999 to 2005, and the director of the CIA from 2006 to 2009.
Right.
And in between, you were the deputy director to the first director of national intelligence.
Right.
So you know all of our secrets.
Well, America's secrets, not
Right.
yours.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's what you say.
Yeah.
Anyway, today we have a lot to talk about. We have 20 minutes. We're going to hit on encryption
Yep.
and surveillance, your new book, which I have right here, Playing to the Edge, and of course, Donald Trump. But before we get started, I would like to know if you can answer this one thing for me. On a scale of 1 to 10, how accurate is X-Files?
Not very.
All right, good enough. Well, let's start with recent news.
But the usual question I get is how accurate is Homeland? All right? And I recommend Homeland.
All right, well, I don't watch that one, I watch X-Files. So let's start with presented nominees.
Yeah.
Right now we have two people that are more than likely going to be the nominees for the Democratic and Republican parties. And with that, they're going to eventually receive briefings from the CIA. Said another way, Donald Trump's about to get our secrets. Is that as scary as it sounds?
Yeah, in some ways it is, and I don't mean to prejudge the man. I mean, requirements, new requirements imposed on a personality may actually create different patterns of behavior. But John McLaughlin, who's a deputy director at CIA, a brilliant analyst, said recently that when candidate Trump gets that first briefing, he will be introduced to problems infinitely more complex than any real estate deal he has ever encountered. And that actually, I think, is going to be the real crossover point. Because what you've seen in the campaign, he's not the only one, but he's certainly been the poster child for it,
sure.
is a treatment of complex national security problems with a level of sophistication that's maybe a half a notch below bumper stickers. And when he is forced to look at these problems in the face, well, I don't know what's going to happen, Matt, and that's a really important question. Does he change his approach to these, or does he stay at this kind of simplistic
Sure.
bumper sticker, from my point of view, fairly consistently wrong response to complex issues? Then you've got the security question beyond that.
So you note in your book that President Obama's policies have been radically different than his campaign rhetoric. So are you saying that it's possible once the weight of the office hits Donald Trump, he might not kill the families of terrorists?
Yeah, well, I would like him to say that as a candidate, that he wouldn't do that.
Sure.
Seriously, and when given the opportunity to do it, he's not walked it back very far. The same thing with walls, the same thing with closing the United States to one of the world's great monotheisms. I mean, those are all, they are dangerous things if a president thought them. They're actually harmful to your security if the candidate of a major political party thinks those things and says those things. So it raises concerns. Look.
How so? Explain that. Elaborate a little more.
Yeah, I mean, look, the unrelenting jihadist narrative is that the state of nature is undying enmity between Islam and the West, or between Islam and what you and I call modernity, all right? We think that's wrong. We reject that, all right? But when a major presidential candidate says they hate us, all of them hate us, well, most of them, at least most of them hate us, and we shouldn't let them in,
Sure.
we live their narrative. We endorse their worldview, which is their recruiting narrative to bring people on board. So it makes us less safe.
Then there's Secretary Clinton.
Yeah.
There is. Can you put into context for me briefly why it was wrong for her to store personal emails on a personal server?
Yeah, and I've said this publicly before, Matt. If there's a sin here, and we'll find out, if there's a sin, it's the original sin. It's setting it up this way. Now everyone's pulling threads on, was that email classified? Was this classified? Who knew what?
Sure.
And the bureau's pulling all these threads and so on. But anyone who's experienced this in government knows that once you've set this thing up this way, this is just going to a dark place. You've got the preservation of government records problem that this just tees up to be a crisis, a catastrophe. You've got the dealing with classified information. Look, let's talk in the real world rather than maybe on one of the 7x24 networks. In the real world, busy people write lots of emails. And occasionally, in writing those emails, they may slide into the narrative things that some security expert sooner or later is going to say, oh, you shouldn't have put that in there. It's one thing to do that on a private server where you're responsible for protecting it. It's another thing to do that on a .gov State Department server, which the government has already taken the responsibility of making secure. Like I said, Matt, you set it up this way,
Sure.
It's heading dark.
Now, independent hackers have claimed that they have access to your emails.
No, Guccifer has said
Sure.
that he's been inside of it. Yeah.
Exactly. How sure are you that foreign governments did the same?
So, absent forensic evidence, which obviously I can't get, all right, I work rather from the inductive line of reasoning. I got data, therefore, I go deductive.
Sure,
right?
that's fine.
So going deductive, I would lose respect for scores of foreign intelligence services around the world if they were not already thumbing through all the emails that were kept on that server.
General, you've called Edward Snowden a traitor for
No, I did not. I said he was a defector. I said he betrayed his coworkers.
You say he betrayed his coworkers, and his coworkers were American citizens as well. And Secretary Clinton obviously did something very similar too by storing the sensitive information on servers stored in her house. Would you call her a danger to her coworkers and the American people?
Not anyway, and the analogy really breaks down right out of the gate. All right.
Break it down for me.
Well,
I'm wrong completely.
You got a sense of scale. All right. You've got 1.4 million documents from one of the most highly classified networks in the American security structure, as opposed to what appears to have been the lazy, inadvertent, I don't know, we'll let the FBI decide, inclusion of classified information in otherwise unclassified correspondence. You've got the purpose over here, which was indeed to create the greatest hemorrhaging of American secrets, legitimate American secrets in the history of the Republic, as opposed to something over here that was done out of stupidity or laziness.
It's fair enough. Let's change gears a bit. Last month, a Senate committee sent a letter to the National Director of Intelligence, James Clapper, asking him to provide the amount of Americans surveilled underneath Section 702.
Yep.
But he's not been able to provide that information. In fact, that information has been asked for before. Why hasn't the NSA been able to or willing to provide that information?
Yeah, and actually it's really interesting, because when Jim Clapper answers the question, he says, for me to do that would be a serious violation of U.S. privacy. And I'll elaborate, all right? So NSA collects foreign intelligence. The target of NSA surveillance must be a non-U.S. person, someone not protected by the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. In the normal course of that activity, communications to, from, or about a protected person, U.S. citizens and others, okay, they're always picked up. All right, this is not new. This is not 702. This goes back to 1952 when the agency was started. It's called incidental collection. You didn't mean to do it, but you picked it up. You're not required to destroy it. Okay? It's not a mistake. All right? But in the normal course of this, you are going to get data where the legitimate foreign intelligence target is communicating with a protected person, or the legitimate intelligence target is communicating about a protected person. And so you've got strong rules inside NSA. What then do you do with the information incidentally collected about U.S. persons? And the normal rule is you suppress it, you minimize it. You don't put it out in your intelligence reports. Okay? But it resides in the database. Now, I freely admit the volume of incidental collection on U.S. persons has been increasing. Remember, I said you had to have this rule in 52.
Sure.
But given what you know about global telecommunications in 1952 and in 2016, it stands to reason.
Right.
The nature of communications are, you're going to get more of this. For Jim to answer the question would require him to go through the collection and tally up all the incidental collection, even when the incidental collection has never been touched before for analytic purposes. So Jim's argument is, for me to do that, actually is going to pull US data into the visible sight range of my analyst that would never normally get there.
There's been plenty of examples in the past, though, where they've been able to provide not the exact number, but a range.
No.
And I don't want you to speak for, as you call him, Jim. I can't do that. But I don't want you to speak for Mr. Clapper. But why can they not provide a range?
No.
Is it's speculated that it's so large that it's nearly everybody.
No, it's not nearly everybody. And Matt, it's not fudging the number, right? You can't say X or round up to X, all right? That's not the issue, right? There are some things where you fudge the issue because you don't want the adversary to know how many FISA applications you went for with one particular company, because that actually cues the adversary where they might want to avoid. It's not that kind of question. It's that to arrive at any number, in order to get at X, you're going to have to squeeze US privacy more than you operationally do now. Now, let me end, Matt. Maybe you got to go do that. Maybe the price of doing this at all is to go ahead and do that to satisfy the critics of the program or members of Congress. I get that. And so Director Clapper, Jim's argument could be overruled, but it's not an illegitimate argument.
It's fantastic. Now 702, let's take a step back. 702 was started in 2008.
Yeah, after I left.
Right, after you left.
I started 215.
Right, this isn't you. We're talking about something a little different. However, it's very invasive and has been renewed, and it's set up to expire next year. And so yesterday, a Senate committee met to discuss revisions to it. Do you feel that Section 702 should be tighter and require a warrant when, say, the FBI accesses information for domestic reasons?
Okay, so 702 requires a warrant already for the actual collection, all right? And it's a generalized warrant.
Okay.
It's not a specific warrant. You go through the court. So, to review the bidding, all right? 702 is a reflection of the telecommunications reality that there are a whole bunch of communication. We're talking about digital communications.
Right. 702 allows the NSA to force Google and Facebook and other companies to provide information about their customers.
About specific accounts. Right.
Sure.
All right? And in the upstream portion of it, actually allows NSA to collect it.
Right.
True electronic surveillance. So you've got,
so let's move
you can
forward.
get it at rest, you can get it at motion, both authorized by a revision of the FISA Act, Section 702.
Are the rules too broad, though? Do they allow the FBI or other agencies to access it?
So NSA is allowed to either collect or ask, passive or active, endpoint or in transit, on legitimate intelligence targets that they have reason to believe are not US persons and are outside the United States. That's vanilla. That's what NSA does all the time, all right? And then it collects all that stuff. That's good.
Sure.
It is based on the reality that not all the emails in America are of America, but not all the emails transiting America are of Americans. And we take advantage of what are realities with regard to global comms pass. Now, what you're asking is different.
Sure. Exactly.
Okay? You're not challenging the collection.
Right.
You are asking about what then happens after the collection. And what happens now is that agencies beyond NSA are allowed to query, listen to my words carefully because it really matters, are allowed to query what is unarguably legitimately collected foreign intelligence, this big stack of stuff, to query that stack with what we call selectors that are of US persons.
Right.
All right? And that is a no-fooling legitimate issue. That is a no-fooling legitimate discussion that we should have. The 702 program is one of those powerful collection programs keeping you safe in NSA history. For God's sake, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Sure.
But I get it. Who it is you allow to query, and what are the selectors? Can you use U.S. identities? I'm sorry, it's a long answer, Matt, but let me finish.
It's fine, completely.
There is a prohibition in NSA against reverse targeting. So, for example, this actually happened during my time there. We got a very bad man we can't find. He's living in the Middle East. Okay? We know he calls his mom every Sunday. I'm getting a little illustrative now on you here, right? He calls his mom, who lives in Jordan, but who's a green card holder, who's now a U.S. person.
Sure.
All right? That Jordanian American green card holder living in Jordan is now protected by the Fourth Amendment. As a practical matter, one way of tracking the son, since you know that the son calls mama every Sunday, is to target mama's phone number. That's prohibited. That's illegal. It's called reverse targeting. You're going after the protected entity. You're trying to capture the communication of the foreign enemy by going through the protected entity. What you just asked me about in 702 is not that.
Right.
But I get the concern. It kind of has a whiff of that. So he's asking a fair question, and so is the Congress.
The issue at hand, General, is that following Edward Snowden's release of all these documents, in general, the American people no longer trust the NSA. Yeah. Does the NSA care? Do they care if the American people trust them?
Absolutely. And I actually,
what can they do to repair that image?
I actually had dinner last night with a bunch of folks in Annapolis who are associated with the National Security Agency, and I mean, they talked to me about going home for Thanksgiving, and dealing with crazy Uncle Bob or crazy Aunt Margaret, and the accusations. No, look, these people share your values. They are trying to apply your values in very challenging operational and technological circumstances. So what you think really does matter. So what that might mean, all right? Everything I just told you about 702, how it's collected, and even how it's queried, may actually be correct. But if NSA wants your endorsement, they may actually have to decide to do things that are legally permissible, but about which you are so uncomfortable, you're willing to go ahead and buy down your security in order to build up a greater comfort level so that this big, no full and powerful organization isn't even in a position to do your privacy harm. But that's an adult conversation, and it's not between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. It's about mature citizens of a democracy trying to draw the right line.
To sum it up, what's correct might not be right?
No, what's legal may not be comfortable to the American people. 215 program's legal. Snowden's problem, if he complained about it, and there's no evidence that he did internally, if he complained about 215, that's the metadata stuff, if he went to a supervisor and said, hey, I'm really concerned about where we'll go, the supervisor would have said, hey, listen, son, this has been approved by 2 presidents, it's legislated by Congress, it's overseen by the 2 oversight committees. In fact, they're really strong supporters. And oh, by the way, a FISA judge checks off on it every 60 days.
Sure.
It's legal.
Metadata.
As it turned out, it wasn't very comfortable.
Right, metadata. And this is a message to Christine in the back. I'm going to go over my time, so let's deal with it. Metadata. You've said this in the past, metadata. We kill people based on metadata. That's rough. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to say to you, don't accept the argument, oh, it's just metadata, don't worry about it. No, metadata is incredibly powerful. I can name a couple of major American firms whose business model is based upon mining metadata.
Who?
Right? No, I'm not going to name them. Right? But it is, so my point in saying that was to concede it's a big deal. Metadata shouldn't get a free pass. Metadata is a very powerful tool for a private company or a surveillance organization. And so my point was, don't let people just flop it off as it's metadata, don't worry about it. No, but getting back to the legal question, in 1978, Smith versus Maryland, 5-3 decision, the court decided metadata is not constitutionally protected. Now, it'll be really interesting if that issue gets in front of the court again, given now what we know one can do with metadata, and will the court come down in the same place? Back to being legal, when I set up the metadata program, it was anchored on the Supreme Court decision that you do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy with regard to your telephone metadata. That's why we did it.
Sure. Now, James Clapper, going back to him, and I hate to do it again, but he said that Edward Snowden accelerated the rise of commercial encryption by 7 years. Yeah. How can the NSA keep up?
So folks out here probably know more than most audiences. I've actually kind of trended Apple in the last dispute. I've trended Apple on security grounds. I actually think the great danger to you and me in the cyber domain is so large that even though Director Comey's got legitimate counterterrorism or criminal needs over here, you better double check injuring what looks to be like pretty good encryption over here,
sure,
even for legitimate reasons over here. But beyond that, the argument I make, Matt, is it really doesn't matter what Director Comey says. It doesn't matter what Congress says. It really doesn't matter what a court's going to decide. You know that the unavoidable arc of technology is in the direction of unbreakable encryption. And there are no laws that are going to get in the way of that reality. And so I'm just talking to my old friends as a former director of NSA. It doesn't matter. Your ability to recover content in your legitimate activities, in your legitimate foreign intelligence activities, your ability to recover content is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. So my advice is get over it, all right? There's still a lot of things you can legitimately do to keep America safe through electronic surveillance, even though you can't recover content. Don't spin your wheels trying to create laws or court decisions that are going to get in the way of something that's going to happen anyway. By the way, if they are successful, if they legislate something.
Are you talking about the Burr-Feinstein bill here?
No, yes, I am. I'm not talking about the other bill
right.
that talks about, hey, let's look at this. This is a tough problem.
Sure.
All right? That Chairman McCall has pushed. All right? Let's say they have their way and they criminalize totally unbreakable encryption.
Right.
Then we will get the worst of all possible outcomes. Totally unbreakable encryption will be pushed offshore. And if you want a problem that's the devil's own problem for American intelligence, that's it.
General, I'm way over time, but I really appreciate you joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all.